So a friend asked me the other day about kind of ascension symptoms, like what happens when you start developing spiritually. And I thought that more people could benefit from sharing about this. So there's a couple different things. I don't know if I'll cover all of them, but maybe I can do it in several parts. One thing that he was talking about is how the things that other people that maybe your friends, family, or whatever are concerned about or feel are important, they start to seem so unimportant to you, and you look and you're like, how can they feel like this is important, and how can they be so unaware? And there's two things to remember about that. And one is that spiritual development is not a linear process. It's not like, you develop in all the ways at the same time. You may be very developed in one way and then have another way that you're still working on. So when we encounter maybe ways that we're more aware than some people, be very careful about what you think that means about you, and how you may think you're, superior further along, which you may be in that one aspect, but it's important to look at how are other ways where you still have work to do. And one example of this that I mentioned to my friend was money. So there's a lot of spiritual people or when people start to develop spiritually, they start to feel like, well, money is not important. And the truth is that money is an energy, and it's an energy that we use on this planet as a form of exchange to get the things we need. And there's nothing inherently wrong with it at all. But the issue is that people start to put it above other things. So for example, putting money above connection, human connection, where you care more about making a little bit more money than you do about spending time with friends and family. That's kind of giving it the wrong place. I won't even say wrong, because everyone's priorities are their priorities, but that's giving it, for some people that might look at that as saying, I would rather prioritize this instead. And it depends how much you have of it and all these things. So we have to be really careful what we think about that. And the people that you are looking at that you're saying, well, they're so concerned about this, they may have also mastered it in a way that you might still need to work on. So for example, again, there's a lot of people who develop spiritually who start to feel that money's not important, but then they don't have what they need, and they still try to get it, in some way. So they're saying they don't care about money, or they don't care about economic resources, but they still have the same needs physically, and they might feel a sense of deprivation, not having what they need, or a sense of entitlement, or resentment, all these things. So we have to say, okay, yeah, maybe I'm developing in certain awareness, but I'm also lacking. And this is just an example. There can be many, many different ways, but you could say, like, I'm also lacking in this way. So really look at things, closely and objectively, and understand that you're not superior to anyone. And then the second thing is that as you're developing, you're just going through levels and changes. So if you look at like how a child is, a child will feel that maybe their toys are so important, right? If you have someone playing with a doll, a child playing with a doll, or playing with some cars, or something that they, a toy that they really love, and if you look at that child who, let's say they're 3-4 years old, and you tell them, in 10 years you're not going to care about this toy at all, they would never believe you. They'll say, this is the most important thing in the world, that's never going to happen, right? But then sure enough, 10 years later, that toy is nowhere around. They don't care about it, they don't think about it. And the same thing happens as we go through stages of development. So we look back and we say, oh, when I 5 years ago really thought X, Y, and Z was important, and now I realize it's not. There's no shame in that. It's just that you've gone through a process of growth, you've gone through that development, and now you're having a different experience. You're seeing something else as being important, and later on what you think is important now, you're going to look at it and say, oh, that really doesn't matter to me anymore, because there's a natural process of growth. Like, humans are made to grow and are made to develop. Another thing that came up was when you become aware of certain things and other people are not aware of them, you might start to feel like you're crazy. So a lot of this world that we live in is really focused on material things. So things that you can, see, smell, taste, touch, hear. And if you can't perceive it with those five senses, maybe it doesn't exist, right? But when we start to develop spiritually, we start to perceive things that are not perceivable with those five senses. But they're very, very real and very, very clear. And I'll give an example, which is actually an example probably everybody knows, which is your mood. So you can feel happy, you can feel sad, and there is no way you can measure that with your senses, right? There's nothing, there's no color to it, there's no smell, there's no taste. So it's just something that you feel, and it's still really very real. It's so real, people do all kinds of things because of what they're feeling. So we know that it's real. And as you start to develop spiritually, you become aware of many other things that also cannot be perceived with the five senses. And so you might start to feel like, oh, I'm losing it. I'm going crazy. But it's not the case. So you need to, again, be very aware and pay attention to what is real, how you're perceiving things, and if other people don't perceive what you perceive as real, you don't need to convince them. Just like, if you have a mood, you're happy, sad, or whatever, you don't need to convince anyone else that that's the case. It's just something for you to know. And you may then, as you grow, encounter people who have that level of awareness. But again, don't think that you're, going crazy. And we also become more sensitive to physical things. So for example, food is one of those things. And I know for me, it's been since I was a kid, there's certain foods that I would just not be able to eat, or I would feel sick, or, not be able to digest them well, or not be able to tolerate them well. There's certain fabrics or, cleaning chemicals that I am really sensitive to. And that's another thing that happens as you start to develop spiritually. And that's just a normal part of the progression. So it's good to take those things into account. Don't discount them. Give yourself what you need, because your nervous system is getting more sensitive. And that brings me to another topic, which is that our nervous system gets more sensitive. It gets more sensitive. There's more information being taken in through it as we're, gaining in our perception. And we have to keep it strong. So it's just like, now I'm not an electrician, but I understand that if you have too strong of a current going through electrical wires, it can burn it out, right? And our nervous system is the same way. Our nervous system is basically an information system, an electrical system. And if it's not strong enough to handle what's going through it, it can get burnt out. So we need to keep ourselves grounded and make sure we get plenty of rest. In Ayurveda, these would all be the things that would be good for Vata dosha. So staying close to the earth, spending time touching the earth with your hands and your feet is really, really good for grounding yourself. And eating, nourishing foods. Make sure that you don't eat too light. Make sure you have plenty of water. And another thing is to strengthen the nervous system. So pranayama, breathing exercises, I've got a bunch of those on my channel. These are all good for strengthening the nervous system, but you really need to do them regularly. Doing it once in a while is not going to really, it's just like exercise, which is another way you strengthen your nervous system. So exercise, especially yoga. Again, I've got tons of videos on that, so you can do those. Those are good things to strengthen your nervous system. Making sure you get enough sleep is super, super, super important. Don't neglect that. And that's another symptom of spiritual growth, is a disturbed sleep cycle. So we have to pay attention and be careful and make sure that we're getting the sleep we need so that we don't have disruption or damage to our nervous system. I was talking about grounding, and one thing that's also really important besides hydrating is drinking the right kind of water. So generally tap water is not really very good. Even if it's considered safe, it's come through these pipes, it's not a live water. So what you can do, I recommend, is just a simple thing. If you're using tap water, boil your tap water. You can try to find natural spring water near you. It's not that easy to find, but depending on where you live, use spring water or artisanal well water. There's a website called findaspring.com that you can find a spring near you. And another thing that came up in this same conversation was looking at how we do need society the way that it's structured, right? And we might not want to play by the rules, and not just society, but the earth itself, right? The way that things are set up in this physical world. We may feel like, as we're growing spiritually, this material stuff doesn't matter. I don't want to play by these rules. I don't want to be here and be alive, right? In this physical reality. So what can help with that is to look at it as a kind of a game. So if you were going to play a game, basketball, it's kind of limiting, right? But the limitation that's there is what makes the game. So basketball, you have your basketball court, you've got your hoops, you've got your rules, right? You're supposed to dribble the ball, you're not supposed to run holding it. All those things, all those rules and regulations and guidelines are what make the game. If you didn't have those limitations, if you were out in a field, you could carry the ball, whatever, it wouldn't be basketball, right? So while you're playing that game, you know that this isn't all there is, but you're accepting those rules for that time to enjoy the game. And we can look at life the same way. So we can say, oh geez, I wish it wasn't set up this way or that way. I wish I didn't have to go through these feelings, or I didn't have to eat to live, or whatever it is. And it is limiting because our spirit is not limited. Our spirit is completely free, but we're in these bodies, and so we have these limitations. And so a way to work through that mentally and not be kind of overwhelmed by it or too upset by it is to say, look, I'm playing this game right now, and the limitations of the game are what make the game. So learn about those limitations and learn about how to work within them to have the most fun. I know basketball, the point is winning, but I feel like in life it's to have the most fun within those limitations and rules, enjoy it, and enjoy that process of spiritual growth, because also the process you're going through right now, you're only going to go through that particular part of it once, and later on other things will come, but you can enjoy just like the child enjoys the different stages of their life growing up. So I hope that this was helpful, and good luck to you in your spiritual growth.